Okay, so I'm going to get back to it here. I've got a very, very short presentation to talk about telling stories, and then we're going to turn the tables over to all of you, and you're going to start telling some stories. And we get everybody's minds thinking about how can you communicate science through personal stories. So in case you haven't heard, so my organization, Biology Fortified, we have a blog mascot. His name is Frank N. Food, your friendly neighborhood genetically modified organism. That's the original one. I got some others here that we made that people are interested. You can check it out. But yeah, I was down at a conference in Mexico talking about wheat, and there was a reporter from ABC News in Australia there, and so that's her there interviewing our plushie to get his story. We've been using him as a narrative device to tell stories about science and to personify plants. I've given some talks talking about plant biotech in particular because it's an area that's very widely misunderstood, and I've often put up slides that look like this. And you can see two different rows of black beans. One at the top that looks very nice. And the one at the bottom, then if you look closely, you can see it's mottled. There's holes in the leaves. It's yellowing and sickly. And those are susceptible to a virus. And the ones at the top are transgenic ones that are resistant to the virus. And so I thought, this is the illustrative picture. I can tell a story with this. And so I gave a whole talk that was like this. There's a lot of different examples, and I gave it in Florida a few years ago. And then I had one slide at the end because it was kind of a laundry list. And I said that these plants are actually really about people. So you got Dennis there. That's when I met him 4 years ago. And so I mentioned just at the very end of the talk about the human aspect. And I met a farmer, Alberto Belmas. His photo's also in Dennis's talk, and I heard about his story. I just told it briefly about how he was trying to feed his family, and the virus hit, and all the problems he was running into. Papaya farmers still today are having issues. And then, of course, we got the story of BT brinjal that we heard about, and that was the example I gave there. And then I went on Twitter afterwards to see, well, what part of my talk were people interested in? It was this slide. And the rest of it, maybe not so much. And so I got an opportunity to do this again the following year, and I changed it around. Instead, at the very beginning, I put that slide at the top. And I talked about the people first, and then I tried to think of a way that we could show who are the people each of these plants are about. Because, the black bean plant it's just a plant, but the real reason why we're so interested in these is because plants are important for people. So I talked about the losses of black beans to this virus. I talked about the researchers who are working on it, and then I have the tractor there because this affects farmers. The planet there because it affects everybody else by means of the environment with reducing the sprays needed to control the insect vectors. And then, of course, an image for the needy. This is for Brazil, and they have a lot of small landowners, very similar to the BT brinjal story. And then people said that they liked the second talk better than the first one. So I think it kind of got across. So I had I had a realization that I was being a little too much of a scientist when talking about this, and that you really need to tell human-centered stories and talk about who the story is about and what are the facts involved. When did this story take place? Where is it happening? And why is it going the way that it is? And here's just some images here of some researchers in upstate New York who are working on trying to bring back the American chestnut tree. And that is itself a really fascinating story in its own right. And it's not so much the tree as its impact on everybody else. And so there are. This is a really good. We got a resource we're going to hand out when we go to group discussions that you can look up. But there are some really important principles that can contribute to making your stories stick. And this Make Your Story Stick site, they call it their success model with duct tape right there. And so the S stands for simplicity. You keep things simple. Now, you don't have to, that's not about dumbing things down, but it's more, you tell the most important stuff, and you don't try to bog it down with too many details all at once. Journalists do something called, a pyramid style story, where you start with the most important information, and then you start getting to the less important, is one way to think about that, because some people may only read the first 4 paragraphs, and you want them to get the idea before they click off of it. And so unexpected for you, something that gets attention. So, there's clickbaity headlines. That's not the way to do it. Then you just anger people, and then they don't even want to read the story, But you find something unexpected, something about the narrative that runs counter to what people expected, and that's salient. It gets people's attention, and it helps the story get across to people. So 2 C's for concrete and credible. You want your story to be factual. You want it to be easily understood and credible. Your sources have to be good, and it has to be the real story itself. And not necessarily like some little side story that's not really the main story of the plants or the people who you're talking about. Emotional for E. Emotions are important. We make decisions based upon emotions. Now, as scientists, we are trained to get out of that mindset because it's data first. You design your experiments, you test your hypotheses, and then you do your statistics, and then you determine what is more likely to be true and what is less likely to be true. But when it comes to storytelling, you need to tap into the other part of our brain that is talking about emotions, and we saw the BT brinjal farmers, and even just the absurdity of that they couldn't even this one farmer couldn't even save enough brinjals to sell because all his neighbors kept taking them from him and asking them, "Can I have a few of these?" And I was laughing. I could see other people laughing too. It just that gets the story across. And of course, the story drives action through stimulation, what to do, inspiration. It's got a start, it's got a middle, it's got an end. And sometimes that end could be uncertain. And that also can be an interesting way to get people to think about it. So I want to leave this slide up. And I'd like to move to some group discussion. So everybody is around some round tables. And I'd like each of you to try and talk story with your neighbors and think about a topic. Think about a subject. It could be your own research. It could be something that you've recently read about. And pick a topic in plant biology of any kind and think about these things, and each one of you, tell a brief story to each other, and then afterwards, if we got some good ones, we'll get some volunteers, and then we'll tell everybody in the room about them and see what everybody came up with.